Hi guys, and welcome to my review of a drama. Basically, this film has caused a little bit of controversy, I believe, and yeah, just to kind of take you through kind of like where I was coming into it, because I think the marketing of this film is certainly a point of contention. So I think that sure we'll kind of start there. We basically had so this was a movie that wasn't really initially on my radar because when I kind of seen the promotion to it, or seen the trailers for it, I kind of just had it down as kind of a straight kind of romantic drama type thing, which just didn't really appeal to me. So it wasn't really kind of on my radar. It was only really kind of in the wake of its release, found about the controversy that it had caused and the talking points. Me, I'm always kind of a bit of I kind of never shy away from a bit of controversy. So I was kind of okay, that's kind of interesting. That's all that's about. I think that it's one of those where it feels like a little bit of contention because basically we have in this movie we essentially have Robert Pattinson and Zendaya playing this couple who are about to get married. Just before them, which they have a couple of friends over, they decide to start the celebrations early. Their drinks are pouring, and they start to kind of have this sort of game where basically they take it in turns to each reveal the worst thing that they've ever done. Yeah, so basically, the when we get to Zendaya's revelation, then we basically, yeah, this kind of is basically where we have a whole controversy. And obviously, it was something that was left out of the trailers and the and to a degree, I can understand why they kind of did it like that, because I know that the intention here is to kind of put the audience in the same sort of seat as her friends and Robert Patterson's character who are hearing this for the first time, to kind of align the audience with those characters. The revelation is meant to have an impact, and I kind of understand it, but obviously I do accept that this is a subject matter that's going to be very triggering, very sensitive to some people, for understandable reasons. So yeah, to kind of lead people into this with kind of blindsided without them kind of having that disclaimer so they can make an informed decision, do you know what I mean? Or whether they want to kind of see a movie that addresses this or not, is it doesn't kind of sit quite right. Yeah, so basically, to just a kind of disclaimer here, myself, this is going to be a spoiler review. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics about how it all kind of wraps up and stuff like that, but I will be talking about spoilers, especially the whole controversy and the whole kind of revelation of Zendaya's character, because I think this is really the core and the backbone of this movie, really, and its talking points. Because yeah, so just you kind of have that just little disclaimer before we kind of go on, so you can get the decision whether you want to continue or not. In light of what I've said. So yeah, basically moving on. So yeah, they're all taking it in turns to each reveal the worst thing they've ever done. Obviously it gets to Zendaya's character, who basically reveals that when she was a teenager, she was getting bullied, and she essentially considered committing this high school shooting, to the point where she actually even got the gun. She actually got a plan of everything um she actually kind of like got everything to kind of like together. She kind of like really premeditated it, and it really kind of got to a point where she kind of like went into the high school that morning with the intention of committing this shooting, and it was only kind of like at the last minute that she decided not to, and backed out. So basically, yeah, this sends all her friends into like absolute shock, whereas one of her friends in particular, they basically it turns out that they've had their own personal tragedy with this issue. So basically, she's just very much like, no, no, no. She's very demonizing of Zendaya's character from here on out. And you basically have, a lot of a focal point really is Robert Pattinson's character, who basically is kind of really, you're kind of like looking at how he's kind of like processing this like revelation in light of the fact that he's just about to get married, as he never knew any of this beforehand. So now he's and so Robert Pattinson and the film itself really kind of like goes on a journey where it's sort of, we're basically really asking about, if somebody gets into that kind of like mental mindset, um does that kind of define them? Does that define their character? Do you know what I mean? It's also kind of like worth kind of like noting that also in Zendaya's character's case, that she does actually go through with it. So there's also that flip side of a coin. Do you know what I mean? Where you're also kind of like asking, if somebody gets into a mental mindset, what can pull them back? What can make them kind of like say no? And obviously, the subject matter here is something that's very prominent. Like I said, it's something that, which a lot of people have had some experience with, and therefore, they might just be totally, be like, no, 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 that's off limits to me. Like, and like I said, I totally understand that. And even people who haven't had the experience, with this, it's because of how kind of like prominent it is. It basically, it still kind of, taps into a fear that you have, especially as parents. So it's one of those. So I can totally understand where somebody would be basically like, no, 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 I don't want that in my entertainment. You know what I mean? That's just, so I can totally understand that. And also, you've got that aspect of people. This may not just land with people just because they kind of like would see it as kind of taking a, a sense of humanizing a high school shooter. So yeah, I totally understand the controversy. However, for me personally, just my personal standpoint, I do think that it's important for us to kind of like have these conversations. I think it's important. I do appreciate this movie kind of like raising these points and these questions. I do think it's important because I am somebody who's very much a firm believer of to kind of tackle a particular problem, to kind of like even have hope of resolving a particular problem, you kind of like have to analyze why that problem exists in the first place. And I think that kind of maybe just kind of maybe getting into the headspace of somebody who's like going to do that, and also looking at like what could pull somebody away from that. I think there's some importance there to having those conversations, going forward. So I can appreciate what this movie is doing. So and I think Zendaya's and Robert Pattinson's characters do a really good job of kind of like portraying that, and on the slightly more negative note, I do think that personally, I did kind of like have a little bit of an issue with the way that the the friend of Zendaya and Robert Pattinson's couple, who is basically playing the maid of honor at their wedding. She is the one who's very much had some personal experience with this subject matter. So she's somebody who's very against it, who's very is just very shutting this thing down and just like no, no, no. um and and I think that for somebody who, for people who, will be in that situation, who will be kind of like of that mindset, it's, because it's sort of like representing a kind of a voice that's obviously very real and very relatable and very understandable. With all of that in mind, I just kind of wish they didn't make her character so unlikable and so stone-faced and so cold. And I do think that it's not a slight on the actress, because I think that she plays a part really well. I do think it's just kind of like more of how the character is pitched and how the character is written. Yeah, so that's slightly tainted it for me personally. But overall, guys, this was a movie that I did enjoy. I did like appreciate the questions that it was raising and stuff. I do think it is probably like one of those movies and it's not a knock on the movie, but I just think it is one of those movies that kind of like just a one time watch type thing. I think it's one of those movies that you could go and see with somebody or go and see in a small group, and you could basically just, it'll kind of like trigger this kind of like conversation piece, so you can go and, talk about and debate, kind of like afterwards. But yeah, guys. So yeah, but I would give this movie a thumbs up. And yeah, yeah, thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to ring a bell for notifications. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please feel free to let me know then in the comment section about if you've seen the drama or not, and also what your thoughts were about it. Yeah, as always, I will see you guys on the next video. You guys take care.